one of the things that I remember coming up, and I didn't even think about it. I didn't process it at a young age because doing what our parents instructed us to do, uh, 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 we did it. We went to as a very young kid, going to Du Bois Elementary School. I remember the high school being on the hill. I wasn't even concerned and didn't even think about the uh, white school and the black school was being separate. I didn't even think about that. All I knew was when I would come from school, from the elementary school, I did my chores, and that me and David Rhodes, who was white, Mickey Plumley, who was white, and Jerry Adams, my best friend, we all played together. We didn't think about, you know, I wasn't allowed to go uptown. I didn't want to go uptown. I played in the background. All that I wanted to do, play horses and cowboy, play football and baseball. That was all we did. Uh, Not knowing that the adults, parents kept a lot of stuff from their kids when I was young. The certain things that they thought was, what I'm saying, that we needed to know, they told us. They told us, per se, that we weren't supposed to go sit down in bonbons. We didn't do that. We didn't ask why, because mom and them told us. Mom and them knew what was good for us and what wasn't good for us. And we didn't do that. And believe it or not, even when I went to junior high school, I really didn't. I knew that it was and I'll say black or white issue, but it didn't matter to me because I've always been goal orientated. Even as a young age, my mom put in me that you're going to be better than I was. And in order to be better than I was, you must listen to what I tell you. And if you listen, then you can go and you can exceed. But you got to be obedient, And you've heard me say this. This was one of the problems. Well, one of my rewarding goals was that when I went into the service, I was able to take orders because of being brought up by being obedient to my mother. I didn't mind because when I joined the service, I joined to be able to take orders, and that really helped me. As I grew and matured, I could see that there really was a little separation. You know what I'm saying? But that didn't stop me. And some of the other kids that I know, it didn't stop us from friendship was just more important to me than, and I'm being serious, than this black or white issue. And we didn't look at it that way because it was just more powerful. It was more powerful than what they taught. Now, it was certain things that we knew that we weren't supposed to do, and we didn't do that because if I got a note from school that I was disobedient in school for doing something that I knew that was wrong, then there were going to be some repercussion behind that. And I've always said, see, there was two people in my family that you did not want to chastise you, to whoop you. Number one was my mother, and number two was my mother's brother, who was also Bishop Colston. And that's why we were, I I grew up to where I am today because of my mother and my family. You know, if my mother had not been a hard-headed boy growing up, you chastise, you discipline boys different than you do girls because we were hard-headed, we were rugged, and it took extra punishment to get our attention. And my mother knew how to do that. And I feared my mother. I feared her because of what she was and what the responsibility that I knew she had, and that I loved her. And even though I loved her, I was still a young knucklehead. And the whoopings that I got today, they would put my mother under the jail. And that's why I believe so much of the young kids now are not disciplined because they're not getting it. And
can you take us back to Mount Hope, to the high school, and when the Du Bois School was closed and the Mount Hope School was open in the same building? What did this mean for the black kids? Were there equal numbers of black cheerleaders? Were there equal numbers of black teachers? Were they? Talk about.
Yeah. You know, you wonder why that we didn't have the most of the team was black. Even the track team, the basketball team, and you would wonder, well, why wasn't there a black, a majorette, or why there wasn't a black cheerleader? And you wonder that. You know, some of us growing up really didn't want to toss gasoline on a partially burning fire. But then you had others that was very outspoken, and they saw a need. And one of the guys, a good friend of mine, he's also a board member of the organization. He was one of the committee person that went to the principal to find out why we didn't have a black cheerleader.
And this would have been in what year?
Let's see, it was 2 years, 60, if I'm not mistaken, 63 and 64.
So start that again. So this, about the student who went.
Yeah, Willie Ben Brooks.
Sorry?
His name is Willie. Well, his name is Willie Ben Pritchett, and it was I know it was William Ham, and it was a couple of other people, and it was a few other people, a committee, and they went and they addressed this issue with the principal.
The issue
about why we didn't have a black cheerleader, and it came out of that meeting that eventually, I don't know how long it took, but I was a sophomore in high school. Is when we got our first black cheerleader. So that would have been, if I'm not mistaken, 63, 64, in that year right there.
Do you remember who she was?
Yes, I do. Her name was Sandra Williams. She was our first black cheerleader. And then after that, the next one was, we had a cheerleader who was Bernadette Canada, and my first cousin, Emily Banks. They were both. We were all in the same grade. Emily Banks and Bernadette Canada. We were all in the same grade. So they were the next cheerleaders after Sandra Williams.
But Sandra was on her own for a while.
She was on her own for a while. She was 2 grades ahead of me. So I was a sophomore, and she was a senior.
Okay, were you at that meeting with the principal?
No, I wasn't.
What
I
did you
wasn't
hear
there.
about that meeting?
Well, when we get together, we talk. Willie Ben Pritchard is a very close friend of mine, and when we leave to go to our meetings, to the Mountain of Hope meetings, I'll drive from here down to Washington, Fort Washington, Maryland, and I get with him, park my car and get in his car, and we go down to West Virginia together, and we talk, and we talk about old things. He was more like a smaller than I was, but he was a very brilliant young man in school.
Smaller, did you say?
He was a little smaller than I was, but he didn't back down from nobody. He treated me like a big brother. He was my big brother because he lived in the last house up in the holler, and I lived in the last house up on the other section of where the white people live, as you call it. And but we were very close, and we got back together after like 20 years of being separated. And then when we met, that bond just blended back together again. And we've been communicating and talking and reminiscing and talking about this. And we talk about this all the time. Because Sandra Williams, she was attractive. She was very light-skinned lady. So see, she was very light-skinned. So she was one of the reasons we talk about. That was probably why they selected her to be a cheerleader, because of her color, her. That's what we think. But then after that, that's when after she became, then we had the other two cheerleaders, and it goes on from there.
Mm-hmm. So, but by the 1970s, we've had an accounting that it had changed. So can you talk about what it felt like to kind of lay the groundwork for the future generations?
Well, we of course we were glad, and to be honestly fair about the whole thing. We felt like that when we got our first black cheerleader, then we could talk to the cheerleaders. We didn't really associate or speak to the cheerleaders because even though they rode on the same bus with us, we didn't talk to the cheerleaders. We felt like it was a no-no. It was a no-no. But then when we got Sandra Williams, our first cheerleader, then we felt a part, even though they were a part of the football team and the football team was a part of them. But when we got a black cheerleader, that's when we really felt that the cheerleaders, to me, well, we really became a part of the cheerleading team. Even though before that, they would make cheers and they would call out players' names. It really didn't mean nothing because that was just, as you say, a job, a responsibility. But when Sandra came on, and then as a team they would work together and they called out the names of the players, that made you feel better. It did, it really did. And then it just takes one to make a difference, and that's what happened. It took one.
But that was a result of a student or students? Were there?
It was a group of, and when you speak to Willie Ben, he can tell you exactly what happened because he was one of the part who spearheaded that meeting. He can tell you exactly what happened, what went down, and all of that.
Did blacks make the same kind of, as you might call it, progress? I don't know if it's progress or not. With the majorettes. Was it the same kind of thing?
Yeah, now this is me. I don't know if the blacks were really wanted to be majorettes. Cheerleaders, yes, but majorettes, no. That we didn't have a black majorette. We did not have a black majorette when I was in school. Cheerleaders, yes, but no black majorettes. And that was due, I guess, maybe to the band coordinator. But no, we didn't have none. But I had a cousin who was the band director, black, for Golly Bridge, and we used to play Golly Bridge. And it was competition, you know. He had the best band in the state. and to me, Golly Bridge outdid Mount Hope band. And they would compete against one another. And it you know, just like you see these colleges now, how they halftime shows. It was like that, but everybody knew that Golly Bridge band was going to do it up because they were that good. They were that good.
But the Black Hope band, when did it begin to have black members?
Oh, it had black members all along. They just didn't have majorettes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they didn't have majorettes. They had black members in the band, instrument playing, but they just didn't have any majorettes or nothing like that. All I can say is that it was, and we wondered why, but we felt like there was a limit to what one can do, because as we were going through, we did try to leave something for the next group to pick up and to take on. And that was one of the things that Willoughby and them Willoughby and their little committee did, to sit down and school. I know this. Even though Willoughby had graduated, he would always come back to Mount Hope, and he would get people and take them to D.C. They would stay with him. He would get them a job, you know, and get them on their feet. He would come back and get another group, take them to D.C., let them stay with him till they got to get him a job, help him get him a job. That's the type of guy that he was, you know. So, yeah.
You sort of ran a halfway house.
Yeah. And we needed that. We needed that.
So were these mostly black students that he got?
Yeah. They were black. Yeah, they were.
So the expectation was they wouldn't be staying in West Virginia?
Well, there was nobody wanted to work in a coal mine. I know I didn't want to work in a coal mine. That was it. They had, and I would. There were certain people who that, and I don't know how they would take to and they would look after certain people. Like I know that one of the football members who was black, his name was Richard Stevenson. He got a job working with the Bureau of Mines, but this was after he was behind me, but I had gone. But they had everybody. I guess they had a little pick up. You know what I'm saying when I say they would. This is like I said. This is only me. They had their favorites, and they would pick them to look after them. I know that there wasn't too many people working at the Bureau of Mines that were black. I know the one guy when I was there, when they built it, he was black. His name was Philip Washington, and he was a janitor there. And then I think eventually, after years of time, he moved up. But a lot of people worked for the Bureau of Mines that when they knew, certain people are prominent, they could get them into that position. But I didn't. My father had worked in the coal mines. I didn't want anything to do with the coal mine because I found out at a young age that getting down on my knees, going to get coal out of the ground wasn't for me. That it had to be a better way. And I say that because my father, we used to go and we used to take coal from these strip mines to build our fire and get our coal and stuff. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. So at that particular time, only the coal mining, I didn't want to do that. And my father had bronchitis, had asthma due to working in the coal mines and all that stuff. And I just didn't want that. The black lung, as you call it. I just didn't want that. And he fought for years trying to get his black lung, and they wouldn't give it to him.
There's that. That's a whole nother story.
That's a whole nother story.
I want to do a whole interview about your dad someday soon. But for today, can you clarify who this Jack was, who was the janitor?
Yeah.
And because there's some confusion, you talk about Jack the player, and then you talk about Jack the janitor.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that?
Well, Jack, the janitor, who was Jack Spadaro, the football player, who we were in the same grade, was his father. Jack was a